Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a nice week and staying warm. Welcome to week 3 of EDP 301. Today, we'll start with this quote from Grant Wiggins. The goal of teaching is not to cover content, but to uncover understanding. Today's focus is about helping students to truly understand, not just covering content. Everything we do, from assessments, portfolios, or lesson planning, is about uncovering understanding and supporting growth. Teaching isn't about how much material we get through. It's about what students actually understand, retain, and can use. Today's focus is on assessment, not just tests, but how assessment connects to learning, reflection, and lesson design grounded in theory. Today, we'll cover 3 big ideas: 1, the types and purposes of assessment; 2, portfolio assessment and why it matters; and 3, how to design lesson plans that align with learning theory. These ideas all work together. Assessment doesn't just come at the end, it shapes how we teach and how students experience learning. To understand assessment, we must first ask, what is assessment? Assessment is the systematic process of gathering, analyzing, and interpreting information to evaluate knowledge, skills, or performance. Primarily used in education to improve learning and teaching. It involves collecting data through various methods, such as tests, observations, and projects, to make informed decisions about student progress and instructional effectiveness. So in other words, assessment is at the heart of teaching. It's how we know if learning has occurred, allowing both teachers and students to understand their own progress. Assessment is not simply about giving grades or ranking students. It is the process by which we make student learning visible. How we know whether learning has happened, how we know where misconceptions might be, where misconceptions might be, and what support students need. Thus helping teachers adjust their teaching, students understand their progress, and institutions to measure effectiveness, serving both formative, during learning, and summative, at the end, goals. To expand that further, assessments can help students identify strengths and weaknesses, like understanding what they know, and where they need more work. Guide self-improvement, such as reflecting on their own learning and to plan next steps, or even provide motivation by showing that effort leads to worthwhile results. Then for teachers, assessments can help make informed instruction to adjust teaching strategies and curriculum in real time, diagnose learning gaps by pinpointing misconceptions and learning deficits, or evaluate effectiveness to determine if teaching methods are successful. Then, on a wider scope of institutions or programs assessment can help measure overall achievement to evaluate if learning objectives are met. Improve programs through data to refine curriculum and educational experiences. Or ensure accountability by reporting on student learning and program success. Assessment holds 3 main pillars: assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. First, assessment of learning. This is summative assessment that shows what students have learned. Examples include end-of-unit tests, projects, or final essays. This is often graded and helps communicate achievements. This is what most people think of when they hear the word assessment. Assessment of learning is summative, so it tells us what students have learned after instruction. That might be an end-of-unit test, a research paper, a final project, or a standardized assessment. The purpose here is accountability and documentation. It summarizes performance at a specific point in time. Second, we have assessment for learning. This is formative assessment used during instruction to inform teaching. Think about quizzes, exit tickets, observations, or quick checks for understanding. The goal here is not a grade. The goal is feedback. Assessment for learning helps you, as the teacher, adjust your instruction in real time. You never want to finish a unit you worked on for 3 weeks only to realize you lost them back on day 1. Now, this also helps students see what they understand and where they might need more practice. Finally, we have assessment as learning. This is where students reflect, self-assess, and monitor their own growth. It emphasizes metacognition students thinking about how they learn. This one is often overlooked but incredibly important. It's the area where students become active participants in the assessment process. By placing students in the role of self-assessors, they monitor their own learning, reflect on their progress, and set goals. This includes like self-reflection, peer review, and metacognitive check-ins. Students aren't just receiving feedback, they're generating feedback. It's important to note that good teaching uses all three, not just summative assessment. Now, there are also several common types of assessment, each serving a different purpose. Here are 6 most common types of assessment you will encounter: diagnostic, formative, summative, ipsative, norm-referenced, and criterion-referenced. Diagnostic is used to determine prior knowledge and skills. Diagnostic assessments are pre-assessments. They tell you what students already know before you begin teaching. This might be a pretest, a KWL chart, or a quick survey of prior knowledge. Think of it as diagnosing what needs to be taught. Wasted time. It prevents because you can tailor instruction based on what students actually need. Then we have formative along with summative, the two most utilized types of assessment. Formative assessment is ongoing checks for understanding. While the learning is happening, formative assessment is the ongoing everyday check-ins. It is often informal, flexible, and deeply connected to learning. Examples include asking students to explain a concept to a partner, observing a small group discussion, or having students complete a short practice problem. Simply noticing that students have a confused or lost face are also a form of formative assessment. Summative, on the other hand, are end of unit or performance assessments to measure mastery. Summative assessment are the culminating demonstration of learning. This is where students show their final understanding. Summative assessments can be traditional tests, such as exams, but they can also be performance tasks, lab reports, speeches, or even presentations. Anything that allows students to demonstrate mastery. Ipsative compares a student's current performance to their own previous work. Ipsative assessment compares a student to themselves, not others. You might show a student their writing from September and compare it to something they wrote in November. You can compare between your diagnostic and summative assessments, or even the formative. Common examples include tracking personal bests in sports, comparing current grades to past performance, and using forced choice personality assessments like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI. This kind of assessment focuses on growth, not comparison. So you're looking for what changed. Norm reference. While ipsative compares a student to themselves, norm reference compares a student's performance to peers. Norm referenced assessments compare an individual's performance against a representative peer group, reporting results by a percentile, grade level equivalency, or standard scores. Think percentile scores or standardized rankings, such as SAT and most IQ tests. And finally, we have criterion reference, which compares performance against a set standard. So criterion referenced assessments measure a person's performance against a fixed set of predetermined criteria or learning standards, rather than comparing them to peers. Examples include classroom unit tests, state achievement tests, driving tests, citizen tests, rubrics, and professional certification exams, like the praxis. Other examples include unit chapter tests, benchmark assessments, and even portfolios. The key is to determine what a student knows rather than how they rank. These are often used for summative evaluation at the end of a unit, or to determine readiness for a new skill. With all these types of assessments, when choosing your assessment type, what information do I need? And what kind of assessment best gives me that? And what kind of assessment best gives me that information? Now we're going to shift to a second major topic. A form of assessment that is incredibly powerful in classrooms, portfolio assessments. But first we need to ask, what is a portfolio? A portfolio is a purposeful collection of student work that helps document learning. It shows growth, learning, and reflection over time. The key word here is purposeful. A portfolio is not a random pile of worksheets. It is a curated selection of artifacts that demonstrate specific learning goals. So what typically goes inside a portfolio? A portfolio includes samples of student work, drafts and final versions, reflections written by students, feedback from teachers and peers, and documentation of goals. When students build portfolios, they are not just demonstrating learning, they are analyzing it, naming it, and taking ownership over it. It shows growth, promotes self-assessment, and can be tied to standards. There are several types of portfolios. A working or developmental portfolio focuses on the process of ongoing work, drafts and revisions and progress. A showcase portfolio highlights a student's best work, often for an audience like parents, peers, or future programs. It's what they are most proud of. It's what they are most proud of. Portfolio, often called standards-based portfolios, are more structured and aligned to standards-based. These are formally evaluated. These are formally evaluated and often used for accountability or program portfolios shift the focus away from a single test and toward a broader picture of learning. And toward a broader picture of learning. They allow for a richer picture of student learning. Help to develop metacognition. Help to develop metacognition. Reflect on their learning. Where students reflect on their learning. Can support differentiated instruction. Can support differentiated student agency and encourages student agency. These portfolios often include self-assessments, and when used for evaluation, are graded using students help co-construct criteria for selecting their work, which builds ownership. Reflection is key. Note, students should answer questions like, how does this artifact show my learning? How does this artifact show my learning? What did I improve over time? What did I improve over time? These portfolios also work well for student-led conferences, where learners explain their own progress. Now, there are a few things to consider when choosing to do a portfolio assessment. You must define clear criteria and artifact selection, like what goes in the portfolio. When using it for reflection, it must be scaffolded. There should be a set format, like digital or paper, and how it's shared. And finally, it requires both teacher and student buy-in. Each type has its own purpose. And you may use different ones throughout the year. Portfolios allow students to reflect and take ownership of their learning. They also provide teachers with rich information to differentiate instruction and support individual growth. So take a moment and consider the following question. Imagine your subject area. What artifact would best show a student's growth over time, and why? Now that we've talked about what we assess and how we document learning, we're going to explore how theory guides lesson planning. Designing lessons with theory doesn't mean your lessons become rigid or academic. Instead, it makes your lessons more intentional, more coherent, and more effective. Designing lessons with theory means intentionally structuring your lessons around established learning principles, like constructivism, Gagne's 9 events, or sociocultural theory. The list goes on to strengthen your lesson. Now, a lesson plan is a flexible guide to create engaging, learner-centered experiences. Lesson design isn't just about activities, it's about why those activities work. Let's walk through what it means to design lessons with theory. Step 1. Set clear goals. Step 1 is always to set clear goals. Ask yourself, what should students know? What should they be able to do? Your learning objectives should be clear, measurable, and aligned with standards or competencies. An objective like, students will understand fractions is too vague. Instead, we want something like, students will be able to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators using visual models. When you write strong objectives, everything else falls into place. Remember, if the goal isn't clear, assessment and instruction won't be either. Next is step 2, structure lesson based on theory. Here we structure the lesson using theory. There are several theories you might draw from. A lesson structured with theory might begin with a quick warm-up that activates prior knowledge. Then you present new content through direct instruction, demonstration, or exploration. After that, you provide guided practice where students try the skill with support. You offer feedback. You provide opportunities for independent practice. And then you assess learning, both formatively and summatively. And finally, you offer opportunities for transfer by having students apply skills in new contexts. This structure supports both understanding and retention. Just to be clear, while his structure is one of the most popular, you don't have to always use it. You might utilize a different structure that can better support both you and your learners. Step 3. Adapt to learner needs. Remember, no lesson plan is one size fits all. Theory reminds us that students come with different backgrounds, abilities, and learning preferences. Differentiation, scaffolding, and choice are some of the ways we can honor those differences. Effective teaching is learner-centered. Students actively build knowledge. They're not passive recipients. That means considering individual differences, differentiating instruction, and being responsive to diverse backgrounds, abilities, and learning styles. Theory helps us anticipate how students might engage and where they might struggle. And finally, we implement and then refine. When crafting a lesson, ask yourself, which theory best supports my objectives? How will students engage, practice, and reflect? How can I differentiate effectively? After teaching, you reflect by asking yourself, what went well? What needs to change next time? Teaching is iterative. Reflection and revision are part of the process. A lesson plan is not a script. It is a guide. As you teach, you adjust based on the students in front of you. Closing and to-do. Before our next class, make sure you've completed the required readings. Black and William. Black and Alan. Next week's readings are an HPL 1 Chapter 2. And don't forget your first reading reflection is due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And group presentations will begin in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next class. Now that you've made it to the end of the lecture, please respond to the discussion prompt labeled Week 3 to all 3 questions below. 1 assessment purpose. Identify one purpose of assessment discussed in the lecture assessment of, for, or as learning, and explain it in your own words. 2 portfolio understanding. What is one way a portfolio shows student learning differently than a traditional test? 3 lesson design connection. Name one step in aligning lesson plans with learning theory and briefly explain why that step matters. Requirements. Your response must reference ideas explained in the lecture or reading. Indicate which one you are using. No peer replies required. Complete sentences, but keep it brief and concise. The post will remain open until 11:59 a.m. on Thursday.